Some ancient texts, they're not just history books, right? They're these sprawling, epic puzzles. We're talking collections of poetry, prophecy, and history that people have been debating for centuries, and they still shape the world we live in today. And honestly, no book fits that description better than the Book of Isaiah. Its influence is, well, it's almost impossible to overstate. To really get why, we need to start with just one single staggering number. 400. Let that sink in for a second. That's how many times the book of Isaiah is either quoted or alluded to in the New Testament alone. 400. That's more than any other prophetic book. It's an incredible figure that tells you just how foundational this text is, not just as history, but as a living document that literally shaped the language of a new religion. And this quote from St. Jerome, man, it gets right to the heart of Isaiah's power in early Christianity. See, the early church fathers didn't just see his words as vague predictions. To them, it was like reading a crystal-clear history of a future they believed was fulfilled in Jesus. They basically saw Isaiah as an eyewitness to events that would happen 700 years later. And that view, it cemented his colossal influence on Christian thought for thousands of years. But, and this is so important, Isaiah's importance in Judaism is every bit as profound. His declaration of God's holiness, that famous holy, 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 is an absolute cornerstone of Jewish prayer. No other prophet's words are read more often in the synagogue year-round. And for ancient groups like the Essenes, the folks who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, for them, Isaiah was an essential guide to their entire faith. His legacy is just deeply woven into the very fabric of both Abrahamic faiths. So this deep and wide-ranging influence is exactly what makes the central mystery of the book so compelling. Because, for all its importance, scholars have been locked in this debate for centuries over a really fundamental question. It's a literary detective story known simply as the Isaiah problem. And that brings us right to it, this central question. Who actually wrote the book of Isaiah? Was it the 8th century prophet from Jerusalem? Or is the answer a whole lot more complicated? This single question is really the key to unlocking the entire puzzle of the book. So the Isaiah problem, in a nutshell, is this big academic challenge to the traditional view of who wrote it. It basically pits the idea of a single, divinely inspired prophet against a totally different theory, that the book is more like an anthology, a collection of writings from different authors, in different places, living in different centuries, all compiled under one famous name. Yeah, the whole debate really boils down to these two competing views. For almost 2,000 years, the unquestioned tradition was that one man, the prophet Isaiah, wrote all 66 chapters way back in the 8th century BC. But for the last couple hundred years, the vast majority of biblical scholars have argued that the evidence points somewhere else entirely. They see a book composed in at least 3 major sections by different authors, spanning more than 2 centuries. And they've got their reasons: big shifts in literary style, vocabulary, and this is the big one, historical context. And this timeline, this is really at the heart of the scholarly argument. See, the historical Isaiah lived and prophesied in the 8th century BC, when the big bad on the world stage was Assyria. But the later chapters of the book, they talk with incredible, vivid detail about the Babylonian exile, which didn't even start until more than a century after Isaiah was gone. They even name the Persian king, Cyrus the Great, who ended that exile in 538 BC. For many scholars, this doesn't read like prophecy. It reads like history written by somebody who was actually there. That 200-year gap is the single biggest piece of evidence for multiple authors. It's not just the historical timeline that's raising questions, though. The book itself seems to have, well, a kind of split personality. It shifts dramatically in its tone and its themes, moving between these two powerful and seemingly contradictory poles. And this oscillation it's really jarring. One moment you're reading these searing condemnations and prophecies of total destruction, and then, bam! The next page, with almost no transition, you're immersed in these beautiful passages of sublime comfort, restoration, and incredible hope for the future. It's this constant whiplash between despair and deliverance that gives the book its incredible theological depth. Here's a little taste of that fiery judgment, right from the opening chapter. This is the voice of a prophet just decrying the moral corruption of his people. The language is raw, it's angry, and it's pointing toward an inevitable, devastating punishment for the nation's sins. And then you hit chapter 40, and the tone completely flips on a dime. It's like the storm has passed, judgment has happened, and now the message is one of pure comfort and forgiveness. It's this abrupt shift from wrath to mercy, that has led scholars to believe we're hearing a new voice, speaking to a new generation that has already been through the punishment. And this same split personality shows up in the book's portraits of the Messiah. On the one hand, you get this divine warrior, a triumphant king who's going to rule the nations with power and establish justice by force. But on the other hand, you get this radical, totally unexpected vision of a suffering servant, a figure who wins not through power but through humility, suffering, and self-sacrifice for others. I mean, these two conflicting portraits have fueled theological debate for centuries. And you can see how these visions of hope have just captured the human imagination. I mean, look at this famous painting, The Peaceable Kingdom. It's a direct visualization of Isaiah's prophecy of a restored world, a world where the lion lies down with the calf and a little child leads them. It's such a powerful symbol of that profound hope that sits right alongside all the fiery judgment in the book. Okay, so why does all this matter? Why does a nearly 3,000-year-old debate about authorship still resonate with us today? Well, because the answer to that question reveals why the book of Isaiah has had such an unending echo through history. The complexity, that is the key to its power. Think about it this way. A lot of scholars would say the power of Isaiah doesn't come from a single static voice, but from a dynamic, theological conversation that evolved over hundreds of years. It's a book that's wrestling with the nature of God through catastrophe, exile, and then restoration. Each layer adds a new depth, a new perspective, which allows it to speak to different people in different ages. And you can see that echo most clearly right here. The New Testament writers saw their entire story prefigured in Isaiah's words. The virgin birth, John the Baptist as a voice in the wilderness, the crucifixion of Jesus as a suffering lamb, his mission to the poor. They used Isaiah's text as the framework, the prophetic blueprint, to explain who Jesus was and what he came to do. And his influence doesn't stop there, not by a long shot. In Jewish tradition, incredible legends arose about his gruesome martyrdom. In Islam, he's honored as a true prophet of God. And even in modern religious movements, his prophecies are seen as being fulfilled today. Isaiah isn't just a figure from the ancient past. He's a global figure whose voice just continues to echo. So we're left with this question, aren't we? Is the book a single, perfect prophecy delivered in its entirety by one man? Or is it something else? A living, breathing, evolving conversation between generations of faithful people, trying to make sense of God's work in a chaotic world. Maybe the true power of Isaiah lies not in solving the mystery, but in the enduring conversation it invites all of us to join.